I am so excited to welcome our amazing next presenter, Amber Stott from the Food Literacy Center in Sacramento. Her session is called Telling Your Student's Story. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. I am really super celery excited to see everybody today. I am going to be sharing a PowerPoint with you, and I've never seen some of these options on my screen before. So give me a minute while I load this up. Never been the host. All right, I got all the buttons I need. All right, so today we are going to be creating stories about our students. So I'm very pleased. Hopefully you guys have found the worksheet that was in your packet in advance. There should be something that looks a little bit like that in the PDF that was shared with you. So make sure that you have that available. We'll be using that throughout the presentation. So I'm Amber, and I am the founder and executive director at the Food Literacy Center. And throughout this, I want you guys using the chat proactively. And we are going to be making sure you learn about specialty crops in this presentation. So in this first one, if you could drop into the chat, what vegetable or fruit is Jasmine holding? Do you recognize that? Drop that in the chat. And in fact, throughout my presentation, you're going to see a lot of California specialty crops that our kids are holding. And if you could please drop in the chat throughout. And we have a moderator who has the answer sheet in case you don't know. And she'll be providing the correct answers throughout my presentation. So here's our quick agenda. We are going to learn and practice 4 elements of a really great short story. So think social media. And by the end of this session, we're actually going to post our stories online if you have access to your organization's social media, or maybe use your personal one. But throughout this presentation, we're going to be crafting our little short story about our students. So why do we want to tell stories? This is really important because the more stories we tell, the more people engage with us and begin to understand what we're doing. And without those stories, I often tell my team, without the stories, how do people know all the amazing work that you are doing? So it's really, really critical to continue to tell your story over and over again. This is how you get new funding, new volunteers, and that's how you eventually reach more kids. So a couple of examples of the kinds of things that we collect at Food Literacy Center. We collect quotes, we collect the art that our kids make, we collect photos. We're constantly taking photos of our students. We get feedback from other teachers, from our own teachers, from parents. If there are things that you guys have, maybe you have older students and they themselves write their stories. Drop in the chat what are some of the things that you guys use to tell the stories of your students, and share those. So now I actually am going to have you guys break out, because the kinds of stories that you are able to tell, you have to first collect all of this material. So how do you get your photos? Do you use permission slips? How are you collecting things? When your kids create art, do they know they're making it for you and you're going to collect it? Or do you go around afterwards and say, oh, can we share that? How do you collect your stories? Do you have your teachers do something at the end of each class where they sit down and reflect? So I'm going to have you guys go into breakout rooms, and you're just going to share with each other, how do you get the materials that you use for telling stories? I bet you all have great tips to share with each other. Welcome back, everyone. Hopefully you guys had lots of great collection strategies to share, and some of you may be new to it, so hopefully you picked up some good tips. So now we're going to look at that worksheet that I gave you, and hang on one second. Yeah. Okay, so 4 elements of a great story. So first, you guys are mostly teachers here. So the first thing we're going to think about is we're going to teach our viewers, our listeners, our social media audience, we're going to teach them about a problem that we are working to solve. Then we're going to teach them about the solution that we use. We're going to make sure that our story shows feeling, and we're going to call others to action. So I'm going to walk you through each of these. So grab that worksheet, and I'm going to give you just like 60 seconds to look that over if you haven't already started writing on there, and start writing out your answer to a few of these questions. And we'll continue to work on this as we go. So take a few seconds. Okay, I'm going to move us along because time is short and I am standing between you guys and Alice Waters. So first we're going to look at this first bullet point, teaching about a problem. So I have 2 little sample posts that we actually have used at our nonprofit that I'm going to read. So the families we serve eat on a limited budget, especially now. We teach our kids to stretch the foods they have even further, everything from potato skins to broccoli stems. Our students love our easy recipes. Who can tell what the problem is in this short story? What's the problem? The problem is that our families don't have a big budget, right? And how about number 2? Rates of food and nutrition insecurity are rising. At Food Literacy Center, we combine immediate food assistance with resilience skill building, and we haven't let the crisis stop us. We're distributing veggie stem boxes filled with healthy recipe ingredients that our students can cook together with their family. So what in this one is the problem? Drop that in the chat. So yeah, it's the fact that the rates of food and nutrition insecurity are rising. So we're going to start by writing down on this next slide, what is your problem that you are working to solve? So write that on your paper. And now on our next slide, we're going to look at number 2. We teach about the solution. So our solution, I'll give you some examples on this next slide. The examples are 30% of our kids do not have internet at home. We're solving this problem by bringing our printed curriculum plus veggies directly to them during school lunch distribution. So what is the solution that we are proposing? This one's easy because we wrote it right in there. Our solution is we're solving this problem by bringing printed curriculum. So one more example, rates of diet-related diseases are high, reflecting the 40% of students in Sacramento who are obese or overweight. Sorry. Studies show that developing healthy habits early can help prevent diet-related diseases. Our free cooking and nutrition program empowers kids to improve their diets with healthy food, made possible by community members like you. So again, What is the solution here? You can drop that in the chat. It's our free cooking and nutrition program, right? So that is our solution. So we have combined, if you go to this next slide, we've combined our problem, which you already wrote down, and then we added to it our solution. So do that on your paper. Add the solution that you're providing to the problem that you already wrote down. And now we're going to look at element 3, showing feeling. So when we think about feelings, you want to evoke emotion. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see some examples of some photos. These photos evoke emotion. We've got a girl smiling from ear to ear about her celery. We've got kids who are pretending to be food superheroes with their pots and pans and whisks. We've got kids going crazy for, what's the specialty crop? Rhubarb. And then we have some farm boots, some old farm boots, some well-worn farm boots. So we're trying to show some emotion through our images, but then also through our words. And I think this is really important. At Food Literacy Center, you see a lot of joy. That's one thing that we really strive for with our programs. We're working with elementary kids, but you also want to be emotionally sensitive. Obviously, during this pandemic, there have been times where we have wanted to have our joy on the back burner because we don't want to seem tone deaf, right? During the George Floyd murders, for example, we did not choose to post images with a lot of smiling and a lot of joy. We wanted to reflect a deeper tone and a more serious tone. So thinking about the feelings and emotions that you're sharing and when and how and what's going on in the world is really important. And one great way that you can reflect feeling is by using your student's voice. So let's look at a couple of examples here of using feelings and emotion. So here's the first example. The families we serve eat on a limited budget, especially now. We teach our kids to stretch the foods they have even further, everything from potato skins to broccoli stems. Our students love our easy recipes. So what's the emotion here? Drop that in the chat. The emotion here is that last sentence. Our students love our easy recipes. So just a simple way. And then of course we have this picture of one of our students cooking. So you combine some of that. I'll look at another example here, example 2. My first year in food literacy class, I was scared to try new things. But by the second year, I realized I liked it and I had fun trying new things. Comments like this from our students make our artichoke hearts sing. By inspiring kids to eat their vegetables while they're young, we help them develop healthy food habits for life. So what's the emotion here? I think we kind of have it throughout. But of course, drop in the chat what your ideas are. I think, of course, my favorite emotion that we have in here is our student, our elementary school student, who's talking about how she was scared, right? Kids can be scared to try new foods, and as our program, as they sit through a few more classes, they get a little less afraid, and then they actually decide that it's fun. So yeah, and then of course we added our own emotion to that, and the fact that these kinds of comments make our artichoke hearts sing. So go through your own files. I know many of you are on your computers. Pull out one of the kid quotes that you have collected over the years, or maybe a really great photo, and add that to the problem statement and the solution statement that you've already written. And let's build our story. We're on the next slide. Thank you to whoever hopped in with the slides. I didn't realize I had to put those back after the breakout room. So hopefully your story is building. Let's take a look at the final element. This is our call to action, or since so many of us are teachers, we're going to give people homework in our story, right? So let's take a look at this example. This is our sample call to action. Aubrey is a first grader at Leotata Floyd Elementary. She and her mom live in nearby public housing, where the average annual household income is just $8,000 a year. Aubrey walks across the street to eat school breakfast. In her food literacy class, she learns the importance of a healthy breakfast so she can focus in school. This is critical because studies show that children who make healthy eating decisions perform better in class. Fund a health hero today. And then there's a website link. So what is our call to action? Drop that in the chat. Yeah, that one was easy. So what are some other examples of calls to action that you might use? It could be eat your vegetables. It could be to donate. Could be, yep, signing up to volunteer. Absolutely. And then in this example, you could back up to that slide with the Savoy cabbage for those of you who were tracking the specialty crops. So in this example, can you find the problem? Drop it in the chat. There's a couple problems woven in here, right? We talk about the importance of needing breakfast so you can focus. There's the family income. We know that they do not have a lot of money. They're living in public housing. Yeah. So what's our solution? Drop those in the chat. She's learning about eating a healthy breakfast, right? And then what's our feeling? Do we have a feeling in this one? We've got those eyes, right? Look at Aubrey's eyes. I just love this photo. And shout out to Samantha on my team. She took that photo. And then we have our call to action, which we already went over. So if we go to the next slide, I'm going to invite you to build on your story, add your call to action to your problem, to your solution, to those feelings. Look at the joy and laughter in this photo. My little buttons. I love these kids. So now you should have a pretty good story. And we're going to share those in a little bit. But before we do, I want to talk about responsible storytelling in my next slide here. So when we think about responsible storytelling, it's probably the most important thing in creating good stories if you do not have this backbone behind you. So the first one is having permission. Obviously, working with children, we don't ever post any photos unless we have permission from the parent. So hopefully you guys talked about permission slips a little bit in your breakout sessions. So at our school, we use the after school program or the teachers or the principal to help partner with us to identify students whose parents will sign off on those permission slips. So that's a really big, important piece. Then when it comes to using real names and schools, so this is going to be different for everyone, but it's a conversation that you should have and you should all come to agreement on how you do it. So at Food Literacy Center, we oftentimes will, depending on what we're doing, we will or will not use the real name of a student. So in the earlier slide where Aubrey was holding the Savoy cabbage, that is not her real name. And the reason for that is we were talking about family income. We were talking about the actual school where she goes to school. And so to add a layer of protection there, even though the parent signed off and said it was okay to talk about her child and to use her child's image, we just, as a layer of protection, will oftentimes not use the real name of a student if we are specifically saying what school they go to. Other times we'll use the real name. So the first slide, if those of you got the pomelo correct, that Jasmine was holding, Jasmine is her real name, but you don't know what school she went to, and some of those other details. So when we can keep the child a little bit more anonymous, we will oftentimes use their real name, but it's very rare that we will use their full first, last, school they went to, age, all of that. We try to be a little respectful in that regard. And you guys may do it differently, but that's how we do it at Food Literacy Center. Then as far as editing and quotes, so, this isn't journalism. You have the freedom to correct a quote, to make the sentence flow, to make it sound a little bit better. Very early in my nonprofit career, I've only ever worked in nonprofits. But I also have a journalism background. So very early in my nonprofit career, I used to, collect the stories of the folks that we were serving, and then I would directly quote them as if I was a newspaper. And you can end up hurting people's feelings if you're not polishing those quotes, writing them into complete sentences, for example. So use your best judgment, but it is okay to complete a sentence or to, put the words in a new order. Collecting quotes in a different language. You would want somebody who speaks that language to be able to collect those quotes, right? So if you have Spanish speaking or Hmong speaking students like we do, you want to have staff or volunteers who reflect those languages as well. So yeah, very important. Also, when it comes to sharing hardship, like we did in the earlier slide with Aubrey, talking about the family's income, that they live in public housing. Of course, this is the reality for the folks that we serve. And of course, we need to share that so that we can have people understand the context of the work that we're doing. I think this part is really important for me as well. Again, I've only ever worked in nonprofit. And I remember my first nonprofit job was in a nonprofit that served survivors of domestic violence. And it used to be, this was 20 years ago, so I'm dating myself a bit, but it used to be, many of you may remember these days where the images would be very sad, very sullen, maybe even faces that are, fuzzed out. And that was about the time you also saw a shift in the direction that I have taken Food Literacy Center. And this has been very important to me. I believe that we need to show the joy and focus a little less on the, trying to tug at donor heartstrings by leveraging the hardship of the folks that we serve. I don't believe in doing that. And so we do it differently at Food Literacy Center. We certainly use the data to help them understand, paint the picture about the high risk students that we are serving in terms of their high risk for diet related disease. But we definitely are trying to show them as kids, any kid, everyday kids with smiles and vegetables. So just a few things about responsible storytelling that I want to make sure that I paint a picture of here for you. Any questions or thoughts on that? Okay, we'll move on. So our next slide is, I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to polish up your story, and then we are going to go into groups and you're going to share. So if you are on social media and you want to post what you've created, you can hop on and post it and then drop the link in the chat here. You can, if you're just like writing it by hand, we're going to go into breakout rooms and then we're going to have you share with your fellow conference attendees, and we're going to talk about our final product. So I can't wait to hear your stories. We're gonna break out and share. All right, well, I do have a little more fun for you guys. So this Wednesday, 2 days ago, the start of our conference, I launched a new podcast with Food Literacy Center called Raising Kale. I'm only marketing it a little, and I have a little clip here that I would love to share. You guys hear it?
I'm Amber Stott, host of Raising Kale, a new podcast where I speak with kale raisers across the country. A kale raiser is a person who gets in good trouble using food as a tool. In season 1, we learn how an elite chef in Vegas packed up his knives and moved to the Midwest to become a chef farmer, and how a recipe for oxtail stew turned into one of the biggest recipe websites in the world. And if you ever wondered who started the Farm to Fork movement, we will talk to her too. Get ready to start raising kale. Join me on radio.com March 10th.
Yay! And if you wonder who that the pioneer of the farm to school movement is that I talked to, that episode drops next Wednesday. And of course, that's our beloved Alice Waters. So that's next Wednesday on Raising Kale. So I hope you guys tune in. I have another really cool and exciting announcement. And that is that also during the pandemic, we were busy during the pandemic. We wrote a book at Food Literacy Center. And it's called Food Anatomy Activities for Kids. And we're super celery excited about it. It is a book for middle school kids, so like 8 to 12. And the book goes on a journey through the history of food. And then we invite kids to go into the kitchen, roll up their sleeves, and in whatever lesson they learned about, they put a little science activity to work. So for example, there is a lesson about cocoa beans, and then we invite students to go into the kitchen and make Oaxacan hot chocolate and learn about melting chocolate. There's a lesson about salt and how important salt was throughout the history of preserving food. And then we go into the kitchen and we make salt cured egg yolks. So, and then kids learn about osmosis. So there's all kinds of fun in here, and all of the staff at Food Literacy Center contributed to the science experiments and the recipes. And it's really cool. It's on pre-sale right now at Amazon. It goes on sale officially on March 30. So I hope you guys will check out our book. And that's pretty much all I have. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have. And somebody, if you could read them to me, that would be great.
One question is, how can people listen to your podcast?
Anywhere that you can download podcasts. You can also, there's a button at the top of our website at foodliteracycenter.org. And then I have all the handles for all the social here on this screen. But yeah, you can get it at radio.com, at Apple Podcasts, wherever you get podcasts. Just search for Raising Kale.
Another question is, how do you engage media?
Oh, yeah. So the short answer is you make friends with them. But before you've made friends with them, you take these little stories, tag those media on social media. If you're posting that photo of Aubrey with her cabbage and you have a call to action, tag the media outlets that are your local your local paper, your local TV station. During the pandemic, everything is Zoom. So if you have like a recipe kit distribution that's real that they can show up to, they will probably come. It will be different when things return, but everything's on Zoom. So yeah, having those opportunities to invite them out. And there's just go to their websites and they oftentimes have a way for you to contact them. Just don't be afraid.
Another question is, what types of stories resonate most with your local community?
I would say a couple of things on that. So whenever we are trying to share our stories with just even on our newsletter or with the media, it's really important to think about what is happening locally. So school's about to return. That's probably happening in your community as well. What are you doing to get ready for back to school? I guarantee the news outlets are looking for stories about that right now. So you're gonna make it easy for them and give them content. Hey, we've got a great story about return to school. Also thinking about, you've probably noticed in the examples that I used that I was doing a lot of connecting the dots between COVID and the current crisis, the rise in food and nutrition insecurity. These are national issues that you are addressing at the local level. And so painting that picture, because the media are so busy right now, everything is on fire. So reminding them about these specific problems in your community and your solution, that's really important.
And Gina shared a story in the chat. She says, I had 2 students who used to sell drugs just so that they could get money for basic items. Once they started their gardens, they switched to selling their herbs and veggies instead.
Love it, love it. And don't forget to put in there what you did to be part of that solution, right? This is where you got to give yourself some props and make sure you're explicitly stating, and here's what we did to get them excited about herbs and veggies. Really important. Congratulations and awesome work. Way to be a kale raiser.
Another question in the chat, are there any specific megaphone accounts or publishers that can help you reach new audiences?
So I'm actually reading a really good book on this right now, and I forgot the name of it, so I apologize for that. But it's a professor who specifically studies the rise in social movements. And oftentimes we think, oh, if only Oprah would just share my thing, right? And in fact, it doesn't work that way. The way any cool movement builds, and I'll give the example of Twitter. So Twitter obviously was once a startup and nobody knew about Twitter. So at one point, Oprah shared Twitter on her show, and there's sort of an urban legend that that's how Twitter became popular. But in fact, all of the data shows that, it happened from Twitter founder telling his mom and his friends to join, and them telling their mom and friends to join. And all these concentric circles grew and grew and grew. And because it was a cool thing, it grew pretty quickly. And by the time Oprah heard about it, it was already pretty robustly utilized, right? And so the point of this is, sure, you can look for a bigger megaphone than your own, but really the most important thing is to get the people closest to you engaged. And they're going to tell their friends, and they're going to tell their friends. And if you can continue to have engagement strategies along the way so that you don't lose them, right? You don't want to lose the friends you make. So how do you continue to make friends and keep them? So that is the most important thing, is all about relationships. So at some point you start forgetting people's names because you have 1,000 friends instead of 20 friends. But that's why you bring more people around you who can remember everybody's names.
I have a question. Do you work with students to help them learn how to share their stories?
Yes and no. And throughout my career, so I've done this type of work in all of the nonprofits that I have worked in over 2 decades. What I would say I've done more work on is training others, like staff of nonprofits, how do they collect the stories? Because I think it's real hard with little kids, right? Because you will ask, you will say, what's your favorite color? And they'll say, I got a puppy yesterday, right? They don't answer the question. And so you really have to be ready to talk to them a lot. But picture drawing for kids is a really great way to get them to say things in a way like saying, draw a picture of something you learned at Food Literacy Center. They always are spot on, right? But if you ask them, they might give you a funny story about a unicorn. So, so part of it is sort of knowing which collection is going to be the best. Is it going to be a quote? And oftentimes that's what it is. It's coming back after class, because the kids will say adorable stuff throughout your class. Like, I've never tasted a bell pepper before. This is my new favorite food. Well, you want to make sure you write that down, because when you go back and ask that kid, what's their favorite food? They're going to say something entirely different. So making sure that you have a process for documenting and collecting, that's really important.
And another question in the chat is, what are your thoughts on reusing pictures from pre-COVID times? Is that okay?
Oh yeah, and you're gonna see a return to that, and it depends on what your story is about, right? Like if you're sharing a story about recipe kit distribution, you should show the distribution, right? And then everyone's gonna be wearing a mask, and there's gonna be a tent or a box. But when you generally talk about our mission is to inspire kids to eat their vegetables, or our mission is to do XYZ with kids, then yeah, it's totally fair to use pre-COVID photos. And, you know, we're still using photos from 10 years ago. That photo of Jasmine, she was one of my students almost 10 years ago now. So she's grown and I'm still using her photo. So yeah.
So 2 more stories to share in the chat. Nicole said, we did taste testing at our school and took pictures of the kids trying. When the kids noticed they were on social media, other kids wanted to try the food items and a picture taken of them too. It got a lot more kids to try.
Oh yeah, yeah, we do that too. Even just turning the camera around to show them, right? Like they just love having their photo taken. Yeah, that's a great one. Love that.
And then Francis shared, we have a 3rd grade class that the teacher uses their field trip as a writing assignment, and we get great and hilarious content from those.
Love that. Absolutely. Yeah. And we collect the photos that our kids make. You know, we have like, you know, walking ear of corn, and, you know, we have all kinds of fun stuff that we use. These are great. Thanks for all of your examples. Thanks for being here. Thanks for participating in the whole conference.